Welcome to Master Math. Here's a couple of tips that'll help you get the most out of this lesson. First of all, you can watch it 3, 4, 5 times if you need. Secondly, if you go through a section and don't understand what we're talking about, hit your back button and review that section again. Next, when you come to a You Try It slide, hit your pause button, pull out some paper and pencil, do the problem yourself, and then hit the forward key to move on to my answer. Well, I hope you learn a little bit of math today and have a good time. Today we're going to talk about simplifying square roots, and I've got 3 rules that I think will help you simplify square roots. First, treat the radical like it was a variable. Second, factor the radical. And third, break up the radical. First rule, treat the radical like a variable. If I had an expression 3x plus 2x, I know what to do. I add my coefficients, my 3 plus my 2, and retain my x, and I get 5x. Well, if I had an expression 3 times the square root of 7 plus 2 times the square root of 7, I could deal with it as if the square root of 7 were a variable like x. And then 3 times the square root of 7 plus 2 times the square root of 7 would equal 5 times the square root of 7. How about a multiplication? If I had 3x times 2x, I'd get 6x squared. I'd multiply my coefficients, and then I'd multiply my variables, and I'd end up with 6x squared. Well, if I had 3 times the square root of 7 times 2 times the square root of 7, I'd end up with 3 times 2, or 6, times the square root of 7 times the square root of 7. Well, a square root squared is the number, so square root of 7 times square root of 7 equals 7. And then 6 times 7 equals 42. Second rule, factor the radical. Do you know what I mean when I say factor? That means to break it down into multiples. If I had the number 12, I could break the number 12 down into 2 times 2 times 3. 2 times 2 times 3 equals 12. Now, if I had the square root of 12, I could factor that so it said the square root of 2 times 2 times 3. And we'll see later how that will be helpful. Third rule, break up the radical. If I had an expression, the square root of 4 times 9, I could rewrite that as the square root of 4 times the square root of 9. Yeah, that works. I've double checked it. If I had the square root of 4 times 9, that would equal the square root of 36. And the square root of 36 equals 6. How about the square root of 4 times the square root of 9? Well, that's the square root of 4, or 2, times the square root of 9. So the square root of 4 times the square root of 9 also equals 6. How about if I had a division problem? The square root of the expression 16 divided by 4. I could change that to the square root of 16 divided by the square root of 4. And that works too. If I just go directly with what's inside the parentheses, I got the square root of 16 divided by 4, or 4, and the square root of 4 equals 2. But if I deal with them as separate radicals, then I've got the square root of 16, or 4, divided by the square root of 4, or 2, and that also equals 2. Now, this doesn't work with addition and subtraction. If I had the square root of 4 plus 9, I could not say that that was equal to the square root of 4 plus the square root of 9. Wouldn't work out number-wise either. If I had the square root of 13 that equals about 3.6. So if I combine those 4 and 9 first, get the square root of 13, it equals 3.6. But if I break it up, square root of 2 is 2, square root of 9 is 3, 2 plus 9 equals 5, so it didn't work. And it won't work with subtraction either. The square root of 4 minus 16 does not equal the square root of 16 minus the square root of 4. Square root of 12 equals 3.46, and 4 minus 2 equals 2. Give this one a try. Hit your pause button, pull out some paper, do the problem, and then hit your forward key to move on to my answer. Well, I got 4 times the square root of 36 plus 3 times the square root of 36. I can treat the square root of 36 like a variable and combine those to read 7 times the square root of 36. Now I want to factor that 36. And I can break that 36 down into 2 times 2 times 3 times 3, so that the expression would read 7 times the square root of 2 times 2 times 3 times 3. Now, how did I factor 36? Well, the easiest way to factor an even number is to break it in 2. So I divided 36 by 2, and I got 18 times 2 equals 36. Well, I've got another even number in there, and I've got a prime number. So if I take that 18 and divide it in half, then I can rewrite it, the expression as 36 equals 9 times 2 times 2. Well, I've got a 9 there, and I can break that up into 3 times 3, so I could rewrite this expression 3 times 3 times 2 times 2 equals 36. Now, I've got 7 times the square root of 2 times 2 times 3 times 3, and I see a couple of 2's in there, and I also see a couple of 3's. I've got 2 2's, I've got 3 3's. The square root of 2 times 2 is 2, and the square root of 3 times 3 is 3. So I could rewrite this 7 times 2 times 3, because I can pull that out of the square root and write 2, and I can pull this out of the square root and write 3. 7 times 2 times 3 equals 42. Well, let's factor 48. I could change 48 into 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 3. I've got a pair of 2's, so I could pull them out of the radical. I've got another pair of 2's I could pull out of the radical, but the 3 is going to have to stay behind because I got nothing. I don't have another 3 to help me get rid of that. So I could rewrite this 2, which is those 2 2's pulled out of the radical, times 2 times the square root of 3. And I could simplify that to 4 times the square root of 3. Well, I think the first thing I want to do is to break up this expression. It right now reads the square root of the expression a squared b, but I could change that. I could rewrite that as the square root of a squared times the square root of b. Square root of a squared, that just equals a, so I could rewrite this again, a times the square root of b. Well, I've got the volume formula. Volume equals base times width times height. And I know that the base is the square root of 30 inches, and the width is the square root of 24 inches, and the height is the square root of 20 inches. So I could substitute those numbers for B, W, and H and rewrite the expression volume equals the square root of 30 times the square root of 24 times the square root of 20. That's pretty confusing. I don't like that. Let's see if we can simplify that a little bit. I know that one of the things I can do is to simplify the numbers within the radical, and it's still going to be a sensible radical. So if I factor that 30 into 5 times 6, I can make that the square root of 5 times 6. And I can factor that 24 and make it 6 times 4. And I can factor the 20 and make it 5 times 4. Well, now I can combine all these. Remember, if I can break it up, I can combine it. And I can combine this radical with this radical with this radical under one radical sign and rewrite this as the volume equals the square root of the expression 5 times 6 times 6 times 4 times 5 times 4. Well, now I got a pair of 5s, a pair of 6s, and a pair of 4s. So I've got the square root of 5 squared times 6 squared times 4 squared. And I could rewrite that the volume equaled 5 times 6 times 4. And 5 times 6 times 4 equals 120 square inches. That's our lesson on simplifying square roots. I hope you learned a lot. Now it's time to test your knowledge. Go to www.mastermath.info and download and print the worksheet Simplifying Square Roots. After you've done that worksheet, go back to Master Math and try the quiz on simplifying square roots. Well, goodbye for now. Hope I see you again real soon.